No one aboard the Imperial flagship had ever heard the emergency alarms sound like this before. The warning tone echoed through thousands of corridors, cutting through conversations, work shifts, and military briefings alike. Doors sealed automatically. Security checkpoints activated. Across the vessel, officers abandoned their stations and rushed toward their assigned emergency posts. Something was terribly wrong. Within minutes, rumors began spreading faster than official reports. Some whispered about sabotage. Others feared an enemy boarding action. A few even believed the ship had come under attack. The truth was far worse. The twin princesses of the Empire had disappeared. Every crew member knew what that meant. The twins were not merely royal children. They represented the future of the Empire itself. Their bloodline united hundreds of star systems and countless alien species under a single banner. Entire worlds had pledged loyalty to the throne because of them. Now both heirs were gone. No distress signal had been sent. No ransom demand had been received. They had simply vanished. Panic spread through the flagship like fire. Security teams flooded every deck. Cargo bays were searched. Maintenance tunnels were scanned. Living quarters were opened and inspected. Every shuttle and escape pod was placed under armed guard. Nobody entered or left the vessel. Nobody. At the center of the growing storm stood the one being every crew member feared. The Alien Queen. For decades, she had ruled an empire stretching across sectors most civilizations could barely map. Entire fleets moved at her command. Political rivals disappeared when they challenged her authority. Even powerful military commanders measured every word carefully in her presence. She was respected. She was feared. And at this moment, she was furious. The Queen stood inside the command center, staring at the giant holographic display suspended above the room. Dozens of officers worked frantically around her, searching for clues, reviewing security records, and processing endless streams of data. None of it mattered. Every report ended the same way. No trace found. No location confirmed. No explanation available. The silence only fueled her anger. "Show me the footage again." The command officer obeyed instantly. A security recording appeared above the central platform. The twin princesses walked through a corridor accompanied by their attendants. They appeared relaxed, calm, completely unaware of danger. The footage advanced. A few moments later, the princesses separated from the group and entered a maintenance sector. The recording continued for several seconds. Then the image suddenly distorted. Static flooded the screen. The video feed died. The room fell silent. The Queen watched without blinking. Again and again the footage replayed. The result never changed. The final confirmed sighting of her daughters ended with darkness. "Restore it," she ordered. "We've tried, Your Majesty." "Try again." The original data was erased. The Queen's eyes narrowed. Erased, not corrupted, not damaged. Erased, that single word transformed a mystery into something far more dangerous. Someone had planned this. Someone on board had wanted the princesses hidden. The realization chilled the command staff. A random accident could be forgiven. A deliberate act could not. The Queen turned toward her military advisors. "Lock down the entire vessel." The order spread across the flagship within seconds. Every deck sealed. Every civilian restricted. Every crew member monitored. Nobody protested. Nobody dared. The diplomatic voyage that had begun as a symbol of peace was now becoming a prison. Hours earlier, the flagship had been preparing for negotiations between major galactic powers. Representatives from dozens of species occupied the vessel. Politicians, diplomats, military observers, and trade officials filled hundreds of guest suites. The mission had been intended to reduce tensions throughout the region. Now those same tensions threatened to explode. Several governments possessed reasons to weaken the empire. Several factions would benefit from royal instability. Every possibility had to be considered. Every suspect had to be investigated. As the search expanded, fear grew. Security officers began questioning passengers. Political delegates found themselves under armed supervision. Crew members were pulled from their duties and interrogated. No one was exempt. Not even senior officers. The Queen personally reviewed reports as they arrived. One after another. Hundreds of names. Hundreds of interviews. Hundreds of dead ends. Still nothing. No evidence of kidnapping. No evidence of escape. No evidence of murder. The princesses seemed to have vanished from existence itself, yet deep within the vessel, beyond the command decks and diplomatic chambers, another pair of eyes had witnessed something nobody else had seen. A human engineer named Ethan Ward worked in the lower maintenance sectors of the ship. Unlike military personnel or government representatives, Ethan occupied one of the least important positions aboard. His job involved repairing systems, inspecting conduits, and keeping ancient machinery functioning. Most passengers barely noticed him. Most officers barely remembered his name. Humans were still relatively new to this part of the galaxy. Respected in some circles, ignored in many others. Ethan preferred it that way. The less attention he received, the easier his work became. But several hours earlier, while conducting routine maintenance near a restricted service corridor, he had seen something that refused to leave his thoughts. At first it had appeared insignificant. A shadow moving where it shouldn't. A figure hiding where no authorized crew member should be standing. Then came a brief glimpse of a weapon. A suppressed energy discharge. And two terrified young princesses running for their lives. The memory kept replaying in his mind. The official reports claimed nobody knew what had happened. Ethan knew that wasn't true. Someone had tried to kill the royal twins. And whoever had failed was almost certainly still somewhere on board. As emergency alarms continued echoing through the flagship, Ethan stared into the distance, realizing a terrible possibility. If the assassin was still searching for the princesses, then the girls might still be alive. And they might be hiding somewhere nearby. Completely alone. Completely vulnerable. And completely unaware that the most dangerous person on the ship wasn't the furious queen searching for them. It was the individual who had already tried to make them disappear once. Ethan spent the next 20 minutes searching the maintenance sectors where he had last seen the princesses. The ship remained locked down around him. Security teams rushed through nearby corridors while emergency announcements repeated overhead. Every passing minute increased the chances that either the assassin or the Queen's forces would find the girls first. Neither outcome felt safe. The assassin wanted them dead. And if the wrong person inside the security network was involved, handing them over blindly could be just as dangerous. A faint metallic sound echoed from an access tunnel nearby. Ethan stopped walking. The sound came again. Small, careful, almost hesitant. He moved toward the source and opened a maintenance hatch. Two frightened faces stared back at him. The royal twins immediately froze. For a moment, nobody moved. Ethan recognized them instantly. The missing princesses. The entire ship was tearing itself apart searching for them. The girls looked exhausted. Dirt covered parts of their ceremonial clothing. Their expressions revealed hours of fear and confusion. One of them instinctively stepped in front of her sister. It was a protective gesture, a child trying to be brave. Ethan slowly raised both hands. "I'm not going to hurt you." The twins exchanged uncertain looks. Most people spent their lives preparing speeches for royalty. This was not one of those moments. These weren't princesses right now. They were scared children. "You need to come out of there," he said quietly. The older twin hesitated. "We can't." "Why not? He'll find us." Those 4 words immediately confirmed Ethan's worst fear. The girls had seen the attacker. "He?" Ethan asked. The younger sister nodded. "He tried to kill us." Neither child cried when she said it. That somehow made the statement worse. The fear in their eyes showed they understood exactly how close they had come to dying. Ethan looked down both ends of the corridor. Still empty. Still safe. For now. He crouched beside the hatch. "Listen carefully. I believe you. But this place isn't secure. The twins remained silent. "Can you trust me?" The question hung in the air. Eventually, the younger sister spoke. "You helped us." Ethan frowned. "When?" "We saw you." The girls explained that during the attack they had noticed him working nearby. The assassin had briefly turned his attention toward Ethan after being spotted. That distraction had given them enough time to escape. The realization made Ethan uncomfortable. He hadn't saved anyone intentionally. He had simply been there. Yet to the girls, that accidental moment had been the difference between life and death. The older twin finally climbed out of the maintenance tunnel. Her sister followed. Both stayed close together. Ethan knew he had a decision to make. The obvious choice was contacting security immediately. That was also the choice the assassin would expect. If someone inside the command structure was involved, transmitting their location could be fatal. He remembered the erased security footage, the disabled cameras, the precision of the attack. This operation had required access, influence planning. Someone powerful was helping. Until he knew who, trusting official channels felt dangerous. "Come with me," Ethan said. "Where?" "My quarters." The girls looked around nervously. "Will we be safe there?" "No place is completely safe right now." The honesty seemed to earn their trust more than any promise could. They followed him. The journey through the lower engineering decks took nearly 30 minutes. Ethan deliberately avoided major corridors and security checkpoints. The twins remained unusually quiet. Occasionally they glanced at passing crew members before quickly looking away. Children raised in palaces often learned confidence. These children had spent the last several hours being hunted. By the time they reached his quarters, both looked exhausted. The room itself was unimpressive. A narrow sleeping area. A compact workstation. Storage lockers. Maintenance equipment. Nothing remotely suitable for royalty. The younger princess stared around the room. "This is where you live?" Ethan laughed softly. "Most engineers don't get palaces." The twins looked genuinely fascinated. Everything seemed new to them. For the first time since meeting them, Ethan realized how isolated royal life must be. They had likely never visited ordinary living quarters before. The younger sister touched a shelf carefully. "You own all these things?" "Most of them." "Nobody shares them?" "No." The girls exchanged surprised looks. Among their species, communal ownership was common among nobility. The concept of a private collection appeared completely foreign. As the tension slowly eased, curiosity began replacing fear. The twins asked questions about everything: Earth, humans, engineering, food, music, old stories. They wanted to know why humans repaired their own equipment instead of assigning servants. Why humans lived such short lives compared to many galactic species. Why human families stayed emotionally connected even after children reached adulthood. Ethan answered what he could. Hours passed. For the first time since the attack, the girls began acting their age. The younger princess discovered an old photograph displayed near his workstation. It showed Ethan standing beside several people. "Your family?" He nodded. The twins studied the image carefully. "You miss them?" It wasn't a question. Ethan smiled slightly. "Every day." Neither princess knew how to respond. Royal children rarely heard adults admit vulnerability. The simple honesty seemed to affect them. Eventually, hunger became impossible to ignore. Ethan shared the supplies available in his quarters. Nothing fancy. Basic meals designed for long work shifts. The twins treated the food as if it were some exotic experience. No servants, no formal dining rituals, no political expectations, just 3 people sharing a meal. The younger princess laughed for the first time. The sound caught Ethan off guard. It felt strangely normal. Outside the room, an empire was descending into chaos. Inside, 2 frightened children were finally beginning to feel safe. That realization strengthened his resolve. Whatever happened next, he wasn't handing them over blindly. Not until he understood who was behind the attack. Later, After the twins had fallen asleep briefly on opposite sides of the room, Ethan returned to his workstation. Something continued bothering him. The attack had been too organized, too precise. He began reviewing maintenance records connected to the area where the princesses disappeared. Most information appeared ordinary. Then he noticed a discrepancy. A series of access authorizations had been issued shortly before the attack. The codes belonged to individuals with unusually high clearance, far higher than an assassin should possess. Ethan followed the trail. One authorization led to another, then another. A pattern emerged. The permissions originated from an office located near the highest levels of command. Someone influential had been creating blind spots throughout the ship. Someone close enough to manipulate security systems without raising alarms. As Ethan dug deeper, a name finally appeared. The moment he saw it, his stomach tightened. This wasn't a rogue operative. This wasn't a random extremist. This was someone from the Queen's inner circle. Someone trusted. Someone powerful. Someone who had likely spent years earning the Queen's confidence. And if the evidence was accurate, that same individual had just tried to eliminate both royal heirs. Ethan stared at the screen. The conspiracy surrounding the princesses was far larger than he had imagined. And now he understood a terrifying truth. The assassin wasn't acting alone. Someone very close to the throne wanted the twins dead. While Ethan uncovered evidence hidden inside the ship's systems, the situation across the flagship continued deteriorating. The Queen's patience had finally run out. What began as a search operation was becoming something far more dangerous. Entire departments were being questioned repeatedly. Security officers who failed to produce answers found themselves removed from duty. Senior commanders who normally stood confidently before the throne now chose every word carefully. Hours had passed since the disappearance. Hours without results. Hours without her daughters. For the first time in decades, fear had reached the highest levels of the empire. The Queen wasn't simply searching anymore. She was hunting. Every new report that reached the command center increased her fury. No sightings. No communications. No demands. Nothing. The absence of information convinced her that someone powerful was involved. Only an insider could hide two royal heirs for this long. Only an insider could erase surveillance records and manipulate security systems without immediate detection. The possibility narrowed the list of suspects considerably. Unfortunately, it also meant the threat might be standing somewhere inside her own command structure. The realization spread unease throughout the flagship. Trust began disappearing. Officers questioned officers. Security teams monitored each other. Long-standing alliances fractured under suspicion. Nobody knew who could be trusted. Meanwhile, Ethan sat alone at his workstation reviewing the data he had uncovered. The more information he examined, the worse the situation appeared. The access records formed a clear pattern. Someone had carefully prepared the attack weeks before the diplomatic voyage even began. Surveillance routes had been altered. Maintenance schedules had been manipulated. Security blind spots had been created and tested. Nothing about the assassination attempt had been spontaneous. It was planned. Patient, professional, the mastermind had expected success. That meant the disappearance of the princesses wasn't merely a failed attack. It was now a crisis threatening the entire operation. The conspirators would not simply walk away. They would try again. Ethan looked toward the sleeping twins. Both remained unaware of how much danger still surrounded them. For a brief moment they appeared peaceful. Normal. Children who should have been worrying about lessons and games, rather than assassins and political conspiracies. The sight strengthened his resolve. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a spy. He wasn't even particularly important. But someone had to keep these girls alive. And right now, that responsibility belonged to him. A sudden notification flashed across his terminal. Movement detected. Unauthorized access attempt. Ethan immediately focused on the screen. Several maintenance corridors near his location had just been accessed using elevated credentials. the same credentials connected to the conspiracy. His pulse quickened. Someone was getting closer. Whether it was the assassin or another operative hardly mattered. The result would be the same. The twins had been found. Ethan quickly disabled unnecessary lighting inside his quarters and checked every available entry point. The room offered little protection. Its walls weren't designed for combat. Its door wasn't designed to resist determined attackers. If professionals arrived, this place would not hold for long. Still, he refused to panic. Humans had survived countless dangerous situations throughout their history by solving problems with whatever resources happened to be available. This situation would be no different. He gathered tools from nearby storage lockers. A heavy engineering wrench. Portable power cells. Emergency repair equipment. Nothing designed as a weapon. Everything capable of becoming one. Years of maintenance work had taught him how to improvise. The twins eventually woke and noticed the tension immediately. The older sister sat upright. "What's happening?" Ethan didn't lie. "They might be looking for us." The younger princess glanced toward the door. "The bad man?" Possibly. Fear returned to both faces. The brief sense of safety that had existed inside the room began fading. Ethan crouched beside them. "Listen to me carefully." They focused on him. "If anyone comes through that door, stay behind me." The younger twin looked confused. "But they'll hurt you." "Maybe." The answer surprised them. Most adults in their lives avoided uncomfortable truths. Ethan never had. "Then why would you do that?" she asked. The question seemed genuine, as though the concept itself made no sense. Ethan thought about the answer. In reality, it was simple. Because they were children. Because someone had to. Because leaving them alone against killers wasn't an option. "You protect people who need protecting," he said. The twins stared at him silently. Neither spoke for several seconds. Eventually, the older sister lowered her eyes. No royal instructor had ever taught them that lesson. Power, responsibility, diplomacy, strategy, those concepts had filled their education. Simple compassion had received far less attention. Elsewhere aboard the flagship, another problem was rapidly unfolding. The conspirators had begun making mistakes. The growing lockdown forced them to move more aggressively than planned. Several suspicious communications were intercepted. Unauthorized data transfers appeared inside restricted networks. Investigators finally started noticing irregularities that previously went unnoticed. The web of deception was beginning to unravel. The Queen received fragments of evidence throughout the day. Individually, they meant little. Together, they painted a troubling picture. Someone near the throne had manipulated critical systems. Someone with authority. Someone with access. Someone she trusted. The realization transformed her anger into something colder, far more dangerous. Betrayal. If her suspicions proved correct, the attack wasn't merely directed against her daughters. It was directed against the empire itself. Then a breakthrough finally arrived. A security analyst rushed into the command center carrying fresh data. The analyst's hands were visibly shaking. Not because of fear, because of what they had discovered. Repeated unauthorized activity had been traced through several engineering networks. The signals formed a path leading toward the lower maintenance sectors. The location appeared insignificant at first. Then, additional records arrived. Multiple anomalies. Hidden communications. Power fluctuations. Restricted access events. All connected to a single residential compartment. The room belonged to a human engineer, Ethan Ward. The command center fell silent. To exhausted investigators, the conclusion seemed obvious. After hours of failure, they finally had a suspect. The missing princesses had vanished. Evidence pointed toward Ethan's location. The simplest explanation practically announced itself. The human had taken them. The Queen studied the information in silence. Every instinct demanded immediate action. Every maternal fear screamed the same possibility. Kidnapping, abduction, treason, at last, a target existed for her fury. Without hesitation, she summoned elite guards and personally led the response. No subordinate would handle this situation. No intermediary would stand between her and the truth. If her daughters were inside that room, she would see them herself. Deep within the engineering decks, Ethan noticed new movement appearing across internal sensors. Unlike before, there was no attempt at secrecy. Security teams were advancing rapidly, dozens of them, and at their center was a single command signature recognized throughout the ship. The Queen. Ethan stared at the approaching indicators. His stomach tightened. The search was over. One way or another, everything would be decided within the next few minutes. As heavy footsteps echoed through distant corridors and security forces closed in from every direction, the Queen stormed toward the humans' quarters, fully convinced she had finally found the person responsible for taking her daughters. The impact shook the entire compartment. The reinforced door folded inward under a single strike from the Queen's security team. Armed guards flooded into the room from every direction, weapons raised and ready. The Queen entered behind them. Her eyes immediately searched for her daughters. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The scene before them was nothing like what they expected. There were no restraints, no signs of kidnapping, no evidence of violence, no terrified cries for help. The twin princesses were asleep. One rested against Ethan's shoulder while the other curled beside him beneath a blanket taken from his own bed. Both looked completely at peace. Ethan sat against the wall beside them. His eyes were open. Dark circles hung beneath them. He looked exhausted. The heavy engineering wrench still rested in his hand. Not because he had been threatening the girls, because he had clearly been guarding them. The room fell silent. Every accusation that had filled the command center suddenly felt ridiculous. The Queen stared at her daughters. Then at the human. Then back at her daughters. Neither child reacted to the arrival of armed soldiers. Neither appeared frightened. That alone told her something important. Children did not sleep peacefully beside their captors. One of the guards stepped forward. "Your Majesty," the Queen silenced him with a glance. Ethan slowly lowered the wrench. He looked tired rather than afraid. "I can explain." The Queen's voice was cold. "You will." The disturbance finally woke the twins. Both blinked in confusion. The younger princess noticed the Queen first. Her eyes widened. "Mother." She immediately ran forward. The older twin followed. The Queen knelt and pulled both daughters into her arms. For the first time since their disappearance, genuine relief crossed her face. The twins were alive. Unharmed, safe, everything else could wait. For several moments she simply held them. The command staff had not seen such emotion from her in years. Eventually the Queen looked toward Ethan again. Her expression hardened. "Tell me why my daughters were hidden inside your quarters." Before Ethan could answer, the younger princess spoke first. "He saved us." The room became quiet again. The Queen frowned. "What do you mean?" The older twin stepped forward. "He found us after the attack." The words immediately changed everything. The Queen's attention sharpened. "What attack?" The twins carefully explained everything. The suspicious figure, the weapon, the pursuit through maintenance corridors, their escape, their hiding place. Then Ethan finding them. Every detail matched pieces of evidence investigators had already uncovered. As the story continued, Ethan finally presented the information he had gathered from the ship's systems. The files appeared on a nearby display. Access logs. Security overrides. Communication records. Authorization codes. The conspiracy unfolded piece by piece. Several officers began reviewing the evidence immediately. The results were devastating. The records were genuine. The manipulation of surveillance systems had occurred exactly as Ethan claimed. Blind spots had been created intentionally. Security routes had been altered. Investigations had been redirected. The attack had been planned from within. One name appeared repeatedly throughout the data: a royal advisor, one of the Queen's most trusted counselors, a figure who had spent years helping govern the empire. The room grew colder as the implications became impossible to ignore. The Queen stared at the evidence. Betrayal always hurt. Betrayal from someone trusted hurt far more. Additional investigators quickly began cross-checking the records. Within minutes, more proof arrived. Hidden financial transfers, secret communications, connections to extremist factions. The advisor had been building support for a political takeover. The twins had been the final obstacle. Removing them would have created a succession crisis powerful enough to destabilize the empire. The diplomatic mission had merely provided the perfect opportunity. The Queen rose to her feet. Her voice carried throughout the room. "Bring him to me." The order required no clarification. Security teams moved immediately. Across the flagship, arrests began within moments. The conspiracy collapsed faster than it had been built. Several accomplices surrendered. Others attempted escape. None succeeded. The assassin was eventually cornered near an auxiliary transport bay. After a brief confrontation, he was taken into custody alive. The threat that had endangered the royal heirs was finally over. For the first time since the crisis began, the flagship began returning to normal. Lockdowns lifted, search operations ended, crew members returned to their duties. But one question still remained unanswered. The Queen turned her attention toward Ethan. The room had largely emptied by then. Only a handful of senior officials remained. The twins stood nearby. Neither seemed eager to leave. "You knew there was danger," the Queen said. "Yes, you knew the assassin might return. Yes, you knew protecting them could make you a target." "Probably," the Queen studied him carefully. Most beings in the galaxy calculated risk and reward before acting. That was normal, expected, rational, yet this human had willingly inserted himself into a deadly conspiracy despite having no obligation whatsoever. He was not a member of her empire. He was not a soldier. He was not responsible for royal security. By every practical measure, he should have walked away. Yet, he hadn't. "Why?" she asked. The answer came immediately. They needed help. The simplicity of the response caught several officials off guard. No speech, no self-promotion, no attempt to impress royalty, just a straightforward truth. They needed help. So he helped. The younger princess smiled. The older one nodded. To them, the answer made perfect sense. The Queen slowly realized that her daughters had learned something during their time with Ethan. Not politics, not diplomacy, not strategy, something more valuable. They had experienced kindness without expectation, protection without reward, compassion offered freely. Qualities often discussed throughout the empire, but rarely demonstrated so clearly. Several days later, the flagship finally arrived at its destination. Representatives from numerous civilizations gathered for the diplomatic summit. What began as a crisis soon became the most discussed story in attendance. The official report spread rapidly. An assassination attempt, a conspiracy near the throne, 2 missing princesses, and a human engineer who stood between innocent children and death. When the public ceremony began, the Queen personally addressed the assembly. Thousands watched. Millions more followed through broadcasts. The Queen recounted the events without exaggeration. She described the danger, the betrayal, the courage displayed by a single human far from his homeworld. Then she offered Ethan enormous rewards. Land grants, titles, wealth beyond imagination, prestigious positions within the imperial government. The entire audience waited for his answer. Ethan respectfully declined most of it. He accepted a modest commendation and little else. The response surprised many observers. It impressed the Queen even more. He had never acted for recognition. That much was now obvious. After the ceremony concluded, the twin princesses approached him one final time before departure. The younger sister hugged him without hesitation. The older one followed a moment later. "Thank you," she said quietly. Ethan smiled. "Try staying out of trouble." The twins laughed. For the first time since the attack, they truly sounded like children again. As they departed with the queen, the ruler paused briefly beside him. For several seconds she said nothing. Then she offered words few would ever hear from someone like her. "You protected what mattered most to me." Ethan nodded. Anyone else might have viewed the statement as praise. The queen intended it as something deeper. Respect, the highest honor she could offer. Long after the voyage ended, the story continued spreading across the galaxy. People remembered the conspiracy. They remembered the assassination attempt. But above all, they remembered one simple fact. The alien queen had searched the entire ship for her daughters. In the end, she found them exactly where no scanner, soldier, or intelligence network could have predicted. Safe, protected, and sleeping peacefully in the arms of a human who chose to care when it mattered most.